People without a home are not criminals. And so let's not jump to the conclusion that if there are organizations sharing space, children are necessarily at risk.
That is Fiona Crossling that you heard right at the end there. She's executive director at Accueil, Bonneau, and she is on the line right now. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, this is one of those situations, this is a really, really tough call. And I fully understand, and I think people who heard what you had to say are sitting nodding and going, you're right. We're not here. We shouldn't be judging these people. But then again, parents also have a right to protect, as you heard a couple of the people in that clip say, to protect their children. So I'm not sure what the question to you has to be other than, is there a better way of doing this?
Yeah, and I understand that it's a tough question. And what I think is most important is that there's no simple answer. So St. Michael's Mission is doing great work, important work, and they're doing it in a place where there is a need. There's also a need for a daycare there that's been operating for a long time. Now the two are coming together. What I think is really important for all of us to understand is the homelessness crisis is a housing crisis. And as the housing crisis explodes across the country, we're going to see more of these problems. And so I would just hope that we don't focus our energy and our attention on, measuring how many meters you should have between a daycare center and a homeless organization, but really, how are we getting homes up fast enough so that people are not ending up on the street? That would be my hope for us as a society.
But by the same token, to your point, as this continues to expand, sadly, as a problem, the homeless issue, because there's simply not enough housing to accommodate people, we're probably going to encounter more situations like this. Is there a way to avoid that?
Yeah, I think there's a great program in Montreal where we have intervention workers who work in and around our organizations and in the downtown core. And the work that our intervention workers do is they go and meet with people who are experiencing homelessness and encourage them to come inside organizations and get the services that they need. So I think that is one thing that many organizations are doing in partnership with the city, and that could be expanded if it's not already happening in that area.
And so to parents, and you heard those two parents there who make very valid points. I can't imagine what it must have been like for a child that morning to see a person lying dead in a playground next to a daycare center. What's the answer to them, Fiona, in terms of how we do a better job of this going forward?
Well, I think I said it. We have to house people. And as you said, the housing is insufficient, so this is going to become a larger problem. I think we do have to talk about poverty and death with our children. People might think that our children should be completely sheltered from all that. I doubt that's the case. I think most of us think in North America we could do a better job explaining the reality of life and poverty to our children. I think we can have workers who, as I said, are doing intervention in and around the area so that they're helping to make sure that it's clean and safe, because obviously you don't want children playing in an area where there's needles or anything like that. But I also think that children can come across death in other situations, not simply because of homelessness. And so my hope is that we're not just going to jump all over this and see this as a danger, but also as a real cry for housing and for support of those who are vulnerable, and an opportunity to discuss issues of poverty with our children. I mean, I'm at Accueil Bonneau, and we did a fundraiser in the fall, and the son of a child, the son of a friend of mine raised money, and I was just so proud of him. He was a very young boy, and he decided he wanted to help. And when he heard that there were problems with funding for food, he's like, well, how can that be? I helped raise money, So I think kids have an amazing capacity to have compassion and to understand and to care about people who are poor and suffering. I understand that daycare kids are much younger, so we do have to especially look out for their safety. And that can be done with services such as cleaning up and intervention and talking and explaining and meeting with the parents. I'm sure they could invite St. Michael's folk in to meet with the parents and together come to some ways of better managing the cohabitation in that area.
To the end of the question, I realized it was sort of framed the same way as the first one I asked you, but I'm thinking this, the idea that, yes, children will at some point necessarily want to be, have to be, should be exposed to the fact that there are that there is poverty out there, that there are poor people, and that some people are suffering. I'm wondering, though, because I'm guessing parents would probably look at this and go, that's fine. I just don't think my child should be exposed to it without my necessarily having done it on my own. In other words, why don't I take that first step rather than my son waking up to someone dying, from an injection at a playground there? But to further that, would it not be a better idea to simply have a rule that say we don't put these sorts of centers directly next to daycares, for example?
Well, I think that kind of rule is unrealistic, and I think it's going to...
Why is it unrealistic?
Because if you knew how difficult it is for organizations that work in homelessness to find locations, constantly they have to move because of different zoning issues or because of funding issues. It is just so difficult. And so rather than focusing again on the policies of separation, we could more easily focus on the policies of housing. If housing is a right in this country and we are accountable for making that happen, you're not going to see these problems because there will be so much fewer people on the streets because they will have decent housing. The housing crisis and the homelessness crisis are completely connected. And so if we spend our time, energy, and money putting in policies to separate people, we are not putting that same time, energy, and money into creating housing and support.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people agree with what you've just said. I think the reality here is, as much as the problem exists, even trying to fix it, and it's happening slowly, it's a long-term solution. It's not going to be happening in a matter of months or even a matter of necessarily of a year or two. And until that does begin to happen, do we just leave things the way they are now?
Well, I've suggested ways that people can be involved, how there can be intervention workers working around the area. Getting back to your point about whether parents can control everything that their children see, if that person had not been homeless, if that had been a teenager who had climbed the fence and had overdosed, would we be having the same conversation? We're having this conversation because the person happened to be homeless. If he was homeless, he was suffering. Would we have had the same reaction if it had been a young person or a woman who the child had seen? If a child sees somebody dead, that is traumatic, and it's something that a family has to process together. But it can happen anyway in life, and I think we shouldn't necessarily jump all over this because it was somebody who was unhoused.
Okay.
Having said that, yes, we have to support people in every way, both the families of those at the daycare and the people who are unhoused and need housing.
I thank you so much for your time and for your work as well as Director of Accueil Bonneau. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.